I watched my intended mother-in-law sob as the IRS agent handed her a bill for $847,000 in back taxes. I had absolutely no sympathy for her, and by the time you finish listening, neither will you. 3 months earlier, she'd stolen my $23,500 wedding fund and called me a gold-digging nobody. And that's not even the worst part. Here's how I made sure she lost everything that mattered to her. Let me tell you what really happened. My name is Sarah, and at 24, I thought I had found my fairy tale. Jake and I had been together for 3 years, and he'd just proposed with his grandmother's vintage diamond ring on a beautiful October evening in Austin, Texas. The ring was this gorgeous Art Deco piece from the 1920s, and when he got down on one knee by the lake, I actually cried happy tears for the first time in my adult life. We were planning our dream wedding for the following spring at this stunning venue overlooking Lake Austin. I'd been dreaming about this place since I was a little girl, driving past it with my mom on our way to her cleaning jobs. I'd been saving every single penny from my job as a dental hygienist for 2 years straight. No Starbucks runs, no Target shopping sprees, no girls' trips to Dallas with my friends. I packed lunch every single day, bought generic groceries, and even cut my own hair to save money. Every dollar that wasn't rent, gas, or absolute necessities went straight into our wedding fund. $23,500. It wasn't massive compared to some Austin weddings I'd seen, but it was ours, and it represented thousands of hours of work and sacrifice. Jake's mother, Patricia Montgomery, had seemed supportive at first when we announced our engagement. She'd even offered to help with planning, which I thought was incredibly sweet. She lived in this gorgeous mansion with perfectly manicured grounds, drove a brand-new white Mercedes SUV, and always wore designer everything. Louis Vuitton bags, Tory Burch flats, jewelry that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. She claimed to own several rental properties around Austin and was always bragging about her business acumen and financial expertise. "Sarah, darling, you're going to be such a beautiful bride," she'd gushed that first week after the engagement. "I want to help make this wedding absolutely perfect for my son." But there was something in her eyes whenever she looked at me when Jake wasn't around. This cold, calculating look, like she was sizing me up and finding me lacking, like I was some kind of insect that had wandered into her perfect world. During our first wedding planning meeting at her house, she'd made little comments that felt like tiny daggers. "Oh, this venue is so expensive, sweetheart. Are you sure that's within your budget?" And, "I hope Jake knows what he's getting into financially with this wedding." I should have trusted that instinct that something was very wrong. 3 weeks before our wedding, I went to the bank to check our joint savings account and transfer money to our wedding planner, Michelle. I was so excited. We were finally going to pay the final balance and make our dream wedding official. My hands started shaking violently as I stared at the ATM screen, certain it had to be malfunctioning. Account balance, $0. This has to be a mistake. This has to be some kind of computer error. I went inside immediately, my heart hammering in my chest. "Excuse me, there's something wrong with my account," I told the teller, a nice older woman named Rose who I'd seen many times before. She pulled up our account and her face fell. "Ma'am, the account was emptied yesterday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. by the secondary account holder," she said gently. Patricia Montgomery withdrew the full amount, $23,500. The blood drained from my face so fast I thought I might faint right there in the bank. "That's impossible. She couldn't." But even as I said it, I knew it was true. Patricia was on the account because Jake had added her for emergencies when we first opened it 6 months ago. I'd protested then, but he'd insisted it would make things easier for wedding planning since she was helping us. "I'm so sorry, honey," Rose said, seeing my distress. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" I stumbled out of the bank in a daze and immediately called Jake, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. "Sarah, what's wrong? What happened?" "Your mother," I choked out. "Your mother stole our wedding money. All of it. Every penny." "That's impossible, Sarah. Mom wouldn't do that. There has to be some kind of explanation. Maybe she moved it to a different account or something." But I knew better. Deep in my gut, I knew exactly what Patricia had done and why. That evening, we drove to Patricia's mansion in Jake's beat-up Honda Civic, which looked ridiculous parked next to her Mercedes in the circular driveway. The house was this sprawling Mediterranean-style place with columns and a fountain, the kind of house I'd only ever seen in movies. When Patricia answered the door, she was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent and had this smug expression on her perfectly made-up face. "Oh, hello, you two. What brings you by so late?" "Mom, Sarah's saying you took money from our wedding account," Jake said, his voice strained. "Please tell me there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Patricia didn't even flinch. She stepped aside to let us in, leading us to her pristine living room with its white leather furniture and crystal chandelier. "I took the money because someone needs to save my son from making the biggest mistake of his life," she said, crossing her arms and looking at me like I was something disgusting she'd found on her shoe. "You're nothing but a gold-digging little nobody who somehow tricked my baby into proposing." My jaw literally dropped. I felt like I'd been slapped. "Gold-digging? How dare you, Patricia? I've been supporting myself since I was 18 years old. I work 50 hours a week." She actually laughed, this cold, cruel sound that echoed off her marble floors. "Please, Sarah. You targeted my son because you knew he'd inherit money someday. I've seen your type before, honey. Poor little trailer trash who thinks batting her eyelashes and playing sweet and innocent will get her a free ride to the good life." The words hit me like physical blows. I'd never felt so insulted, so belittled, been treated so rudely in my entire life. My family did live in a mobile home park inn, and I had gone to a community college before transferring to UT. But I'd worked for everything I had. I was outraged. If Jake wasn't there, I'm not quite sure what I would have said or done. "Give us back our money," Jake demanded, finally finding his voice, his face red with anger. "That money wasn't yours to take." "What money?" Patricia's voice was smooth as silk. "I don't see any documentation that it was specifically yours, Sarah. My name is on that account too, and as far as I'm concerned, that money was mine to use to protect my family." I felt physically sick, like I might throw up right there on her expensive Persian rug. "You can't do this, Patricia. We have a wedding in 3 weeks. The vendors are expecting payment." "Oh, sweetie," Patricia's voice dripped with fake sympathy. "I guess you'll have to postpone. Or better yet, call the whole thing off and do my son a favor." That's when I saw red. Literally saw red. "I'm not taking this lying down, Patricia." But Patricia just smiled this cold, victorious smile. "What are you going to do about it, trailer trash? Sue me? With what money? Face facts, Sarah, you're outclassed here. You never belonged in Jake's world, and deep down you know it." I tried everything reasonable first, spending days running around Austin trying to find help. We went to the police, but Officer Martinez just shook his head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, but this is a civil matter since her name was legally on the account. You'll need to handle this through the courts." Our consultation with lawyer David Covenon was even more discouraging. You could sue, but it would take at least 6 to 8 months and cost around $15,000 in legal fees. Even if you won, collecting the judgment could take years. That was money we absolutely didn't have. Besides which, what was the point in paying lawyers $15,000 to try and win $23,500? It just wasn't worth the time and effort. Meanwhile, Jake either begged or berated his mother every single day, and she just got more vicious with each conversation. "She's not good enough for you, Jakey," she'd purr during his visits to her house. "Her family lives in a trailer park. She went to community college. Come on, she's a dental hygienist, barely a step above a secretary. You could do so much better. What about that lovely Jennifer from your law school? Her father owns half of downtown Austin." Patricia started a full-scale campaign to destroy my life. She called Dr. Peterson's office where I worked, telling my boss that I was emotionally unstable and might steal from patients or mishandle medications. "I'm just concerned about my son's fiancée," she told Dr. Peterson with fake concern. "She's been acting very erratically lately, and I thought you should know since she handles money and drugs." Thankfully, Dr. Peterson had known me for 3 years and didn't believe her, but it was humiliating. When that didn't work, she showed up at our apartment complex and told our landlord that we were planning to skip out on rent and flee to Mexico. "I've seen them packing boxes," she lied to poor Mr. Rogers. "I think they're planning to disappear in the middle of the night." The wedding was canceled. We lost our $3,000 deposit at the venue, Laguna Gloria. The caterer kept $1,800. The photographer kept $900. Friends and family from out of state had already made travel arrangements, bought dresses. requested time off work. My aunt flew in from New Mexico, only to find out there was no wedding. The humiliation was absolutely crushing. My grandmother, who'd been so excited to see me get married, cried when I told her what happened. "That woman is pure evil, mija," she said in Spanish, holding my hands. "But God sees everything." But what broke my heart most was watching Jake crumble under his mother's psychological manipulation. His confidence evaporated. He started questioning everything about our relationship. "Maybe we should wait," he said one night as we sat in our tiny apartment, surrounded by wedding presents we'd have to return. "Maybe she's right that we're too young, that we're rushing into things. Jake, we've been together for 3 years. We're not rushing anything." But what if she's right about the money thing? What if I'm being naive? That's when I realized Patricia wasn't just stealing our money. She was stealing our future, our confidence, our love for each other. She was systematically destroying everything we'd built together. I had to fight dirty. I became completely obsessed with understanding how Patricia could afford her lavish lifestyle. She claimed to own several rental properties around Austin, but something felt off about her story. The math didn't add up. Even successful property managers don't live like royalty. I started doing research at the Austin Public Library, spending hours on their computers digging through public records, property records, business filings, tax assessments, clerk records. I learned how to navigate every database they had. What I found made me literally gasp out loud in the quiet library. Patricia didn't own any rental properties. 0. She was listed as a property manager for something called Heritage Holdings LLC, but when I dug deeper into the LLC through the Secretary of State website, I discovered something incredible. The real owner was Jake's grandfather, William Montgomery. He was Patricia's father-in-law, and he had died 9 years ago. So, how come she'd been acting as if she owned all this property? I spent another week looking through probate records, and what I discovered changed everything. William Montgomery's will was public record, and it was perfectly clear. Everything was supposed to go to Jake when he turned 25, which was in exactly 6 months. Patricia was only the trustee, which meant she was supposed to manage the properties until Jake got them. But here's what made it even more shocking. Jake had no idea about any of this. His father had died when Jake was only 11 years old. His grandfather died when Jake was 16. The will reading happened during an awful time when Jake was just a grieving teenager who barely understood what was going on. For years, Patricia had been telling Jake that his grandfather left him a little something, maybe enough for college or a down payment on a house someday. She always said the inheritance was tied up in legal problems and that most of the money had been lost to bad investments during a financial crisis. Jake honestly believed his grandfather had been just a regular middle-class guy. He thought Patricia's wealth came from her own property management business. The truth was devastating. Jake's grandfather had been worth millions. Jake was supposed to inherit everything, and Patricia had been stealing from his inheritance for years while lying straight to his face about it. She'd been living like royalty off money that legally belonged to her son, all while making him feel like he should be grateful for whatever scraps might be left. Her manipulation was so complete that Jake actually felt guilty about potentially being a burden on his mother financially. It was obvious she had absolutely intention of giving her son his inheritance, now or in the future. She was a monster. I felt like storming into her home but there was still more to come. When I cross-referenced her tax filings with the rental income statements I'd discovered buried in property management records, I had to pay $50 for copies of documents from the county clerk, but it was worth every penny. Patricia had been pocketing rental income for 3 years and not reporting it to the IRS. She'd also been claiming fake business expenses through shell companies she'd created, Montgomery Consulting Services and Heritage Property Solutions, companies that existed only on paper. The amount was staggering, over $400,000 in unreported income. But I wasn't done digging. I started following her around town like a private investigator, taking photos of her daily routine. Her 9 a.m. Starbucks run, always a venti caramel macchiato with extra whip. Her shopping trips to Nordstrom at the mall. Her long lunches at expensive restaurants like Uchi and Jeffrey's, all paid for with money that legally belonged to Jake. I documented everything in a notebook. Times, locations, amounts spent. I even got photos of her credit card statements when she carelessly left her purse open at a restaurant. Then I got really, really lucky. I was parked across the street from her mansion one evening around 7 p.m. when I saw her dragging something heavy from her basement through the side door to her Mercedes. Multiple trips, multiple heavy boxes. She looked around nervously each time, like she was afraid someone might see her. I waited until she left, then snuck around to the basement window. The ground-level window was partially open for ventilation, and I could see inside clearly. What I saw made my heart race so fast I thought I might have a heart attack. Boxes and boxes of financial documents, bank statements, rental agreements, legal files, and something else that almost made me fall over backward. Cash. Bundles and bundles of cash, stacked in clear plastic storage containers like you'd buy at Container Store. Hundreds and hundreds of bills, rubber banded together. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. I took photos with my phone through the window, making sure to get clear shots of everything. The cash, the documents, the organization system she'd set up. I finally had everything I needed to destroy her. I spent the next 2 weeks carefully documenting everything like I was preparing for the trial of the century. I bought a high-quality digital camera with a zoom lens from Best Buy, spending money I couldn't afford, and took crystal-clear pictures of Patricia's basement through the window. I could clearly see the cash storage containers, the document boxes, even some of the individual papers. I also started recording every single conversation I had with her. Texas is a one-party consent state, so I only needed my own permission to record. I bought a tiny digital recorder on Amazon and kept it in my purse during every interaction. My coworker Jessica's boyfriend worked for the IRS in their Austin office, and she helped me understand exactly what documentation they'd need for a tax evasion case. I organized everything meticulously in color-coded folders. Income records, fake expenses, shell companies, cash evidence, property documents. But I wanted more than just tax troubles for Patricia. I wanted her to feel the same humiliation, the same helplessness, the same crushing defeat that she'd put me through. I reached out to Jake's Aunt Linda, his father's sister, who'd always been incredibly kind to me. She worked as a nurse at St. David's Hospital and had never liked Patricia, always sensing something false about her. "Linda, I need to talk to you about something important," I said when I called her. "Can we meet for coffee?" We met at Radio Coffee and I told her everything. Her eyes got wider and wider as I showed her the evidence. "I think Patricia has been stealing from Jake's inheritance for years," I said, spreading out copies of documents on our table. Linda's face went from shocked to furious. "I knew something was fishy. Dad left Jake everything in that will. I was there when he signed it. But Patricia keeps saying the estate is complex and needs more time to settle. She's been saying that for 2 years. Would you be willing to help me expose her?" I asked. Linda smiled grimly. "Honey, I've been waiting for someone brave enough to take that woman down. She's been poison in this family since the day she married my brother." We spent hours planning. Linda still had her spare key from when she used to help take care of Jake's grandfather before he died. She knew Patricia's schedule, her habits, her weaknesses, time for the confrontation. I arranged to meet Patricia at her house under the pretense of apologizing and asking for forgiveness. I called her on a Thursday afternoon, putting on my most defeated voice. "Patricia, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said," I told her over the phone. "Maybe you were right about some things. Could I come over and talk to you? I want to apologize." She sounded absolutely delighted. "Of course, Sarah. I'm so glad you're finally seeing reason. Come by Saturday afternoon around 2 p.m. Jake thought it was a good idea. He was still desperately hoping we could all somehow get along and be a family. "Maybe if you two can work things out, we can figure out how to move forward," he said hopefully. Linda was already inside Patricia's house by 1:30 p.m., having let herself in with her spare key. She was hiding in the kitchen, ready to make her dramatic entrance. I arrived at exactly 2 p.m., recording device in my purse, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Patricia, thank you so much for seeing me," I said as she led me into her pristine living room with its white leather furniture and crystal chandelier. I wanted to say I'm sorry for how things have gone between us. She looked absolutely smug, like a cat who'd caught the canary. "I appreciate that, Sarah. It takes real maturity to admit when you're wrong about something. I was hoping we could work something out about the wedding money," I continued, sitting on the edge of her expensive couch. I know you think I'm not good enough for Jake, but maybe we could find some kind of compromise, maybe a payment plan? Patricia laughed, that same cruel laugh I'd heard before. Oh, sweetie, that money is long gone. I had expenses to cover, bills to pay. Being Jake's trustee is a full-time job, you know. Very complicated financial work. Trustee? I acted confused, tilting my head. What do you mean exactly? I manage all of his grandfather's properties, she said proudly. 12 rental houses around Austin, 2 commercial buildings downtown. It's very sophisticated work. Certainly nothing someone like you could understand. That's when Linda walked out from the kitchen, her nursing shoes silent on the marble floor. Hello, Patricia. Patricia's face went completely white, like she'd seen a ghost. Linda, what are you doing here? How did you get in? I still have Dad's spare key, remember? Linda said calmly, dangling the key ring. I've been listening to you lie about Dad's estate, and I think it's time for some truth. I don't know what you're talking about, Patricia stammered, but her voice was shaking now. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of her basement. Her face went from white to green to gray. Looks like you've been busy collecting rent money, I said sweetly. Money that legally belongs to Jake, not you. And not reporting it to the IRS, Linda added, her voice hard as steel. Dad always said you were too greedy for your own good, Patricia. Looks like he was right. Patricia stood up, her hands shaking so badly her jewelry was rattling. You can't prove anything. You're trespassing. You've been spying on me. That's illegal. I'm calling the police right now. Actually, I can prove everything. I pulled out a thick folder of documents. 3 years of unreported rental income, fake business deductions through shell companies you created, those storage containers full of cash in your basement. The IRS is going to be very, very interested in all of this. You little, Patricia started to say, but Linda cut her off. Careful, Patricia. Sarah's recording this conversation. I held up my phone. I've been recording everything for weeks, including you admitting you stole our wedding money specifically to break us up. That's harassment, financial abuse, and probably a few other crimes. Patricia's legs gave out completely. She collapsed back onto her designer couch, her perfect composure finally cracking. What do you want? She whispered. Our wedding money back, with interest for the 3 months you've stolen from us, I said firmly. A written apology to Jake explaining exactly what you did and why. And you're going to transfer all of Jake's inheritance to him immediately. No more delays, no more excuses. Linda smiled. Or we go to the IRS, the police, and every single family member who's ever wondered why Dad's estate is taking so long to settle, including your precious country club friends. The power shift was absolutely beautiful. For the first time since I'd known her, Patricia Montgomery looked small, vulnerable, defeated. I can get you the wedding money, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. But the inheritance, it's complicated. No, it's not, Linda said firmly. Dad's will was crystal clear. Jake gets everything when he turns 25 in 6 months. You're just the trustee. You never owned any of it. Fine! Patricia exploded, tears starting to run down her cheeks and ruining her perfect makeup. Fine! You win! But this isn't over. This family will never accept you, Sarah. Oh, but I wasn't done yet, not even close. Getting our wedding money back was just the opening act. Patricia had messed with the wrong girl, and I was going to make sure she understood that completely. The very next Monday morning, I walked into the IRS office with my perfectly organized documentation. The agent, a serious woman named Miss Reisner, looked through everything with growing amazement. This is some of the most thorough evidence I've ever seen in a tax evasion case, she said. Usually we have to dig for months to find this kind of information. I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed, I said innocently. Tax evasion cases usually take months or even years to process, but my evidence was so comprehensive and damning that they fast-tracked Patricia's case. Within 6 weeks, agents showed up at her mansion with a warrant to search the premises. But that was just the financial reckoning. The real satisfaction came from watching her entire carefully constructed social world crumble piece by piece. I'd made copies of everything and shared it with Linda, who had absolutely no problem spreading the truth to the entire Montgomery family. Patricia had been bragging for years about her successful property management business and her sophisticated financial expertise. The family was absolutely horrified to learn she'd been stealing from Jake's inheritance. His uncle Mike, who was a lawyer with a big firm downtown, immediately filed legal papers to have her removed as trustee. "She's been lying to all of us for years," Mike told Jake during a family meeting at Linda's house. "Your grandfather would be rolling in his grave." But watching Patricia's social circle collapse was the most satisfying part of all. Patricia was a member of the Westlake Hills Women's Club, this exclusive group of rich wives who met for lunch at the country club every Wednesday to gossip and judge everyone else in Austin. She'd been treasurer for 3 years, always bragging about her financial skills. When word got out that she was under IRS investigation for tax evasion, they didn't just drop her. They launched a full investigation into the club's finances to make sure she hadn't stolen from them too. Her best friend, Margaret Rothschild, who owned a boutique, actually crossed the street to avoid talking to her when they ran into each other at Whole Foods. "I can't be associated with someone under federal investigation," Margaret told mutual friends. "Think about my reputation." The country club suspended her membership pending the investigation. The charity board she sat on quietly asked her to step down. The social invitations dried up completely. Her Mercedes got repossessed in broad daylight. Turned out she'd been making the payments with Jake's rental income, and once that got frozen, she couldn't afford the $900 monthly payment. Watching her walk to her Toyota Corolla rental car in designer heels was priceless. But the absolute best part came 4 months later. Jake and I were busy planning our makeup wedding, a small, intimate ceremony at Laguna Gloria with just our closest family and friends, when Linda called me, laughing so hard I could barely understand her. "Sarah, you have to get down to the Round Rock Premium Outlets right now," she gasped between laughs. "You have to see this with your own eyes." I drove the 30 minutes north to Round Rock, wondering what Linda had found. She met me in the parking lot, still giggling. "Macy's," she said, pointing toward the department store. "Women's clothing section." I walked into Macy's, and there she was. Patricia Montgomery, former queen of Westlake Hills, was standing behind the women's clothing counter folding clearance sweaters. She was wearing a polyester Macy's uniform with a name tag that said, "Patricia, Sales Associate." The woman who'd called me trailer trash was now working retail for $12 an hour. When she saw me, her face went completely red. She looked around desperately like she wanted to disappear. "Hello, Patricia," I said sweetly. "How are you enjoying your new career?" She couldn't even make eye contact. "I need this job," she muttered. "The IRS payments. Sweet, sweet justice." But there was one final twist that made everything perfect. The IRS investigation revealed that Patricia owed $847,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. She had to sell the mansion, the designer clothes, the jewelry, everything. The house sold for $1.2 million, and after paying the IRS and her legal fees, she had barely enough left to rent a studio apartment in East Austin. Meanwhile, Jake got his full inheritance when he turned 25, $2.3 million in property and investments that his grandfather had carefully built over a lifetime. We were able to have our dream wedding at Laguna Gloria after all, with 150 guests who celebrated our love story and Patricia's downfall with equal enthusiasm. During the reception, Jake's Uncle Mike stood up to make a toast. "Sometimes it takes an outsider to show us who our real family is," he said, raising his glass to me. "Sarah showed us the truth about Patricia, and more importantly, she showed us the kind of woman Jake was smart enough to fall in love with." The entire Montgomery family, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, welcomed me with open arms once they knew the truth about Patricia's lies. I went from being the gold-digging nobody to being the beloved daughter-in-law who'd saved the family fortune. As for Patricia, last I heard she was still working at Macy's and still making payments to the IRS. She'll be working retail for the next 10 years to pay off her debt. She had to move to a studio apartment complex near the airport, the kind of place she used to drive past and shudder. The woman who destroyed our first wedding to prove I was a gold digger had proven she was the greedy one all along. The woman who'd called me trailer trash was now living worse than I ever had. Jake sees his mother for exactly who she is now. He hasn't spoken to her since our wedding day, and he's told me he never wants to see her again. "She stole from my inheritance, lied to my family, and tried to destroy the best thing that ever happened to me," he said. "She's not my mother anymore." I may have started as a dental hygienist from a mobile home park, but I ended up with a devoted husband, a loving extended family, financial security, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that sometimes karma needs a little help from someone who refuses to be pushed around. Patricia Montgomery learned the hard way that you should never, ever mess with a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And that's exactly how I made sure she lost everything that mattered to her. Hope you enjoyed this tale. What did you think about it, and would you have acted the same way, or have you ever had major family issues over money, betrayal, or other issues? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's talk about them, and more importantly, let's all learn from them, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more real-life stories you won't forget in a hurry. If you loved seeing Patricia get exactly what she deserved, you'll love the story that's just popped up on the screen.